Hi, hello everybody. This is International Master Savgivon here, and this time we're going to talk once again about the transformation from the opening to the middle game in chess. So in this video I wanted to present two examples which are actually very much close to my heart. So it's both of them were played in my own games. So the first example, which you see in front of you, was played in the last round of the Pardubice Open, and this is actually the game which granted me my first international master norm back in 2012. So thanks to the fact that I won this game with the black pieces, I managed to get the norm. And the second game would be a game in which I beated a grandmaster, one of the first time I ever did so, and I also won the beauty prize in that tournament for the game. So quite nice games. So in this position, our first example, we have move number 15 here. White just recaptured the pawn, which was stated on the d3 square, and it's black to move. And I was thinking for a bit in this position because let's say I wanted to ask myself, what exactly am I doing? What do I want to do? It's time to think about some sort of a plan of action after the opening. So let's see, what is the situation of my pieces? This is the first question that I should ask myself after I realized that white having no real threat. So which pieces I really want to improve in my position, which I'm not satisfied with. So the knight on a5 is situated on the rim of the board, but it is making some pressure against the pawn on c4. We have the rook on a8, which is situated on an open file. Seems reasonable to me. The bishop on g7 is on the long diagonal, probably the best place that it could be. Knight on h5 is a bit awkward on the rim of the board, so I might want to improve the knight, this one on h5. And what else? Okay, we have the bishop on c8, which is still not developed, so black could consider just a simple move like bishop d7, simply getting it one square more developed and perhaps trying to connect the rooks on the next move. But while this is possible, I thought that the move bishop d7 is not achieving too much, because the bishop on d7 still not doing that much better than on c8. So looking at the position with the more fresh eyes, I realized that beside the fact that the knight on h5 is situated badly and it's a bad piece which should be improved, white has very serious targets or weaknesses on the c4 pawn. Also the pawn on a2 is isolated, so it also might be considered as a weakness. So basically in this position, once I realized that the pawn on c4 and the pawn on a2 are quite weak and that I want to improve my knight on h5, basically the right move popped to my head quite easily when realizing this. So the move is knight to f6. Basically I want to maneuver my knight back into a more active position. So as you can see by the arrows, via d7 the knight might reach the square on e5, which is a nice square, c5 is a nice square, or even b6. So I'm having a lot of options. So white played a very logical move, rook a to b1, developing his rook into the open file. And now I think perhaps my opponent missed my next move, which in a way it's just the continuation of my plan, so knight to d7. But in first sight it actually seems as though black blundered, because white can now fork the queen and the rook with the move knight e6. But actually, after this move, black can play the move knight e5, counter-attacking, and now it appears that the white queen and the knight on e6 are both under attack, and if the knight captures my queen, I also capture his queen, and the knight on d8 is simply trapped and white is losing. So, after knight e7, black is already threatening to play the knight to e5 and to capture the pawn on c4. So white moved it on e2. I played my knight on b6. And suddenly, like almost out of nowhere, it became extremely difficult for white to defend the pawn on c4, even though it's quite a simple threat. And he thought for a little and decided just to give up the pawn. He played his bishop to a1, trying to open up the line for the rook. But now I just captured the pawn, and I simply had the pawn up, and later on the black pawn started marching in the center of the board, and I had a clear advantage, which helped me a lot later on to win the game. Actually, white's position was still not too bad had he found the move knight to d5. So rather than playing very passively, white should have really tried to kind of counter-attack and try to cause some problems for black. So the main point is now that if black takes the pawn on c4, white can play the very active move rook to c1, with the point that if the knight moves from c4, the pawn on c7 might be hanging in this case, and if black plays the move c6 himself, now white has a very nice exchange sacrifice with rook takes c4, getting rid of black's active knights. And after knight takes c4, queen takes c4, c takes d5, bishop takes d5. So from a material point of view, black has the advantage of the exchange, but white's pieces are very, very strong in the center of the board, and this grants white good chances to get an equal game, but not more than that. So we will not see this game until the end, but I will drop the PGN file in order for you to see, for those who are interested. I will just mention that in this example it was kind of it seems very easy, kind of. Okay, I just moved my knight from h5 to b6 and just took the pawn. It seems so easy, but you see that once you get a very clear target in the enemy position, and you have also kind of a very clearly bad piece that you want to improve, suddenly the next moves or the right plan just comes much more naturally once you realize that. So you don't have to have like a very huge master plan in order to construct a good plan for the middle game. So let's see the next example. So here I'm having white once again against the grandmaster. So he played here b5. So it's quite a complicated position, as you can see. The kings are situated on different sides of the board. So previously we had opposite side castling. So let's see what is the status of the position. So first of all, does black has a threat here, so we could quite fast see that he is actually not having a very serious threat. Even though he has the c file opened against our king, the bishop is quite adequately protecting the pawn on c3, so everything seems to be okay from that angle. So once again, let's focus about the things we already know we should do after the opening. First of all, let's concentrate about which pieces we want to improve in white's position, and also we will search for some targets to attack in black's position, some weaknesses, and perhaps we should also seek for pieces in the black's position which we would like to exchange or drive away from their position right now. So from white's perspective, what we could see, we have the bishop on f1, which is still not developed. So first task it perhaps to think how exactly to develop it. And let's think about where could be a good square for this bishop. So in my opinion, a square like d5 or e6, somewhere along this diagonal against the black king with g8 could be very nice. So we can see that in general the white squares in the black's position are very weak. So we already have a kind of a clear idea that we want to play on the light squares, because as you can see, all of black's pawns are situated on dark squares, which make the light squares quite exposed. We have the rook on d1, which is situated on an open file on the d line, but it doesn't have too much to do there. So where we want it to be is most likely on the h file, where this rook is situated. This rook is obviously already a very good piece, having an open file against the enemy king, and the rook on d1 would be quite happy to join it on the h file perhaps one day and kind of join the action. The bishop on d4, as we said, is quite a solid piece defending the king side. The queen for now seems also kind of nicely centralized in the center of the board, so perhaps we don't want to touch it too much. What about black's pieces? Let's see. Black has a strong knight on e5 that we can see. A centralized piece which maybe we would like to drive away. And he has the rook on the c file. Maybe he would like to double the other rook on the c file. He has the queen on a5, which is attacking the white's pawns, but really not creating like actual threats to the white position. So we could conclude that black has no threat, and also in the coming moves perhaps there is no big attack coming against our king. So let's see, what should white do here? What would you play if you were white in this position? You can try to pause the video and think for yourself. So basically I played the move g3 here, and the longer I thought about this move, I realized like how perfect is this move for white here, because it fits practically all of his needs. So first of all, it prepares the development of the bishop to h3 and e6 perhaps. Also it prepares the breakthrough in the center with f4, so trying to open up more lines against the black king, and also once again trying to drive away the knight from e5. And also perhaps in the future, if white would like to double the rooks on the d file, on the h file, so you already have the possibility of rook d2 followed by rook h2 doubling on the h file and creating a strong attack. So a really perfect move for white, so fitting all of his needs. black played knight f7 here, creating an idea or a threat of a pawn to e5, trying to harass my bishop on d4. And in this position, white could very well just play queen d2 with the idea that on e5 he has squares to retreat to with the bishop, so perhaps bishop e3. But I thought that after rook c8, black gets at least some sort of counterplay against the pawn on c3 with his heavy pieces, and maybe I should not allow this. And as I thought about it, my first instinct was to ask myself, okay, what if I just go with the plan? What if I play bishop h3? He plays e5. Now for 1 second it looks like my bishop is trapped, but it actually has a square on a7, which is a bit of an awkward square to be in, but it's just not trapped yet. And you see that the move e5 is very bad for black from positional point of view, because he's weakened this d5 square, which could be a nice square for my bishop to be in, as we said earlier. And he also took away this e5 square from both of his knights. So he counted on the move queen to c7 here. Now black is threatening to play rook a8, trapping my bishop. So what do you think? How should white play here in order to save his bishop, of course, and without losing anything else in the process? So white played here the move bishop e6, simply continuing with the plan. Now the point is that if black plays rook to a8, white could play his bishop to d5, skewering both of the rooks on the same diagonal, and if black takes the bishop, white just wins material after bishop takes rook. So this is bad for black. He tried to play a5 here, creating the threat of rook a6, but now I very simply played my queen to f2, threatening a huge threat of queen h2, creating a battery on the h file, and also giving my bishop a square to run to e3 when needed. So the threat of queen h2 is very strong now. That's why black played king to g7. So if now white plays his queen to h2, black has rook h8 covering the h file. So I simply played my bishop to d5, kind of continuing with the plan. Now the bishop is gaining more and more power. He has now a perfect square on d5, which cannot be driven away by any of black's pieces. It also makes some pressure on the knight on f7, so really a perfect square. So now black played his rook to a6. If the rook takes on c3, which once again looks tempting for 1 second, but white simply has bishop to b6, and it's simply very difficult for the queen to still protect the rook on c3, and amongst others white can also just simply retake the pawn on a5 on the next move, so this is really not too satisfying for black. So he played his rook to a6, and the white bishop was simply just in time to escape from the danger zone. Now white got really a perfect position from strategical point of view. He has stabilized his bishop on d5, kind of chased away the strong knight from e5, back to a very passive square. In general, if you can see that both of black knights are very badly placed in this position, they almost cannot move from their places. They do protect the black king, but they say that knights are bad defenders, and this is the reason why later on when white will start his attack, the knight would be very clumsy defenders of the black king. So black played queen to e7, trying to get his queen slightly closer to the king. And now after improving our bishop, I really felt it was a good time to start my attack over the h-file. So there are really more than one way to double the rooks here on the h-file. But now I played a move which I quite liked. So basically I didn't forget about black's potential counterplay, which is of course always an important thing. So even when you feel like you're having a dominant position and a good attack, you should always be in the alarm from the opponent's chances of getting counterplay. And I realized that black's only counterplay is connected with the breakthrough pawn to b4, trying to open up the position on the queen side. So this is why I played the move queen to f1 here, which is both an attacking move because now the queen might join the action via h3, and I also cleared the way to the rook to come to the h2 square. But also I just attacked the pawn on b5 and I prevent it from moving to b4 because then the rook on a6 would hang. So he played his rook to b8, and after rook d2, white's plan is just crystal clear to double the rooks on the h-file. Now the move rook h7 check is already a threat, so he played his knight to f8. So at the moment the knights are covering all of the entry squares of these rooks on h2 and h1. But now comes the final kind of blow. So what do you think? How should white continue his attack from now? So it's a good time to involve the queen in the attack, obviously. It also would be nice to open up even more lines against the black king, even though he's already very exposed, but the move f4 is kind of begging to be played here. Now white wants to open up the f-file and to get his queen involved in the attack even more. And after rook c8, f takes g5, knight takes g5. Now the queen also joins the attack, and after bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, we see that the king is just getting attacked from every direction. And after the simple move rook h8, black's pieces were too passive and they were even not able to defend from such a simple threat of rook g8 checkmate. So black resigned in this position. So in this position, once again, white realized his strategic ideas after the opening quite inefficiently, in an efficient way. So he got his pieces on the right squares, and the attack came later on where white's pieces were completely ready for it and more organized than the black's pieces. So really hoped you enjoyed those two examples. Once again, those two were very close to my heart because of their importance in the tournaments they were played. And once again, thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.